Shabbat shalom, everyone. Aviva Mazal Tov, again, Yasher Koach to you and to your entire family. So, this letter went out, and it was initially signed by over 600 rabbis, condemning the current normalization of anti-Zionism in politics and calling out, in particular, New York City now Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani. And then a second letter went out, and it too was signed by hundreds of rabbis, and this second letter rejected the first letter and what the signers considered to be an unfair characterization of Mamdani. And I thought that was the most Jewish thing that I had ever heard. But I was wrong, because then a third letter came out, and it too was signed by hundreds of rabbis, and this third letter was a letter about how clergy should not be signing letters because it can be divisive and detrimental to Jewish unity in America. And that, my friends, was the most Jewish thing that I have ever heard. In real life, playing out in newspapers and websites before our eyes, we have witnessed firsthand the undeniable empirical truth that we call 2 Jews, 3 opinions. It's actually pretty incredible. In one mayoral race, we have shown the country more insight into the intricate psychology of the Jewish people than any book or seminar could ever achieve. But I don't want us to stop there, because I believe that this case study of Jewish public discourse is important. And that is why I am asking for your support this morning in my penning a 4th letter. This is what I have so far, so I hope that you'll provide me with some feedback before the letter goes out. As rabbis from across the United States and Canada, committed to Jewish legalism, honest halachic discourse, and thoughtful analysis of an evolving reality of religious Jewish observance, we have come together to humbly submit that chicken be recategorized as parv. The signatories of this letter unanimously profess that they have never milked a chicken, nor have ever heard or witnessed such an act taking place. If a chicken cannot be cooked in its mother's milk by the decree of basic biology, how can we remain silent in the limitless possibility of the dairy-chicken union? The voices of our Midwest rabbis in particular must be heard as they endure the humiliating plight of Parv Ranch. That's all I have so far. It's a work in progress. I think that we need this 4th letter. I really do. And if I can take on a little bit more of a serious note for a minute here, I think we need this letter not by way of content. As tempting as a real chicken parmigiana sandwich would be, I'm not actually advocating for any revolutionary change to our halachic norms. But what I do think that we need is a reminder of our shared Jewishness. I know that there is a lot of conversation about these letters, about their efficacy, the eternal debate about Jews airing our dirty laundry in public. But to me, that's not really the concerning part of this current dialogue. What concerns me is that we are putting so much stock into singular aspects of our Jewish identity and making them the entirety, or at least the great majority, of who we are. And that is a huge problem. Because the great Jewish enterprise that we call Machlochet L'Shem Shemayim, debate for the sake of heaven, or put a little less poetically, constructive critical discourse, presupposes a foundation of unshakable Jewish identity. It is what makes every machloket, every conversation in the Talmud possible, even when these rabbis of our tradition go at it and go at it hard, is because at the end of the day, they know they are coming back to a sound and structured and prominent and thoughtful Judaism. And it feels like we are losing that in a world that is less and less interested in culture and peoplehood, and more singularly focused on identity as defined by politics. And this is not unique to Jews, but we are certainly not immune to it. It is a product of media and pundits telling us that groups of people should feel certain ways, should vote certain ways, should care about certain things, and if you don't, then are you actually part of that people? But that idea is fundamentally inconsistent with a communal ideology, with a communal identity. What defines a people? Sure, some political issues can be part of that equation. Those come to us in ideas that are our values, the things that we care about, the things that we will argue with one another about. But any sociologist or anthropologist will tell you that peoples are defined by communal structures. The language they speak, the music they make, the art they create, their dress, their theological views, and yes, critically, what they eat and what they don't eat. Those elements make up the foundational pillars of a people, of a tribe. And in order for us to remain a singular, unified tribe, we have to reinforce those pillars. We have to let them hold up that tent that makes us who we are. And then, and only then, should we duke it out with one another. Aviva, you spoke beautifully this morning about Avraham Avinu, about our great ancestor Abraham resting under his tent, recovering from his painful surgery of his Brit Milah, and then when seeing three passers-by, rushing up and hurrying to greet them and treat them with love and respect and humility. And commentator after commentator reflects on the great humility of Abraham, his unwavering kindness as he greets strangers with the same love and dignity that we would afford to family or close friends, even in the pain of his recovery. That's what they stress over and over again. Even in recovering from his circumcision, he does this. But what I believe these commentators overlook is that it is precisely because of his pain and his recovery that he is able to perform this mitzvah of hachnasat orchim, of welcoming strangers into his home. Because his pain is a product of brit, his bris. And bris means covenant. It means a promise. And his brit is a promise, a declaration between Avraham and Hashem that they are forever bound to one another. And that Avraham will forever be guided by three central principles: love of God, love of the land, and love of the people. That promise is what puts the ground under his feet. It is what turns the uncertain dream of this journey into an unshakable reality. And it is what allows him to go forward with confidence, unafraid of encounter, unafraid of dialogue, and unafraid of discourse. But without the brit, without the covenant, it's impossible. Some years ago, Rabbi Starr ruffled some feathers with his sermon about saying Kaddish for Tikkun Olam. But he was right then, and he is right now. Because his argument was not that we should do away with Tikkun Olam, with social justice as an aspect of our Jewish identity, but that we should reject the idea that Tikkun Olam could be or should be the entirety of our Jewish identity. That social justice without Shabbos, without holidays, without ritual, without Torah and Jewish history, without Jewish thought, without Jewish music, without Jewish poetry, Jewish food, is just social justice, which is a Jewish value, but there is so much more to who we are. We contain multitudes. We must contain multitudes. It is true of Tikkun Olam. It is true of Jewish politics. It is true of halachic interpretation. And it is true of our relationship to Israel as a political entity. Now, that last part is important, so let me clarify. Our love for and commitment to Israel as the Jewish nation, as the Jewish ancestral homeland, and as the home of half the world's Jewish population should be unwavering. But our relationship to any given Israeli government, like any of these other categories, cannot be and should not be the defining element of our Jewish identity. We cannot allow the world to squeeze us into such narrow boxes. And we cannot allow ourselves to break down our ancestral pillars and replace them with transient moments of identity politics. We can't. Because who we are, first and foremost, just like Abraham and Sarah, is defined by our love for God, our love for our land, and our love for our people. That is what makes us, us. That is what makes our music, our art, our sacred text, our literature, our theologies, and our philosophies, our values, and our commitments. And those other things, they're beams and plasters, parts of us, even important parts of us. But they cannot stand by themselves. They're not meant to stand by themselves. And so I think we need this fourth letter as a reminder that our birthright is the sanctity of argument for the sake of heaven. Machlochet l'shem shamayim. But as the Talmud reminds us, if it is not for the sake of heaven, then it will not endure. We can argue about politics. We should argue about politics, both in the diaspora and in Israel. But we cannot define ourselves by politics. We must contain multitudes. And the place we must start is with covenant. Not with mayors, not with buzzwords and Twitter trends, but with chicken sandwiches and ranch dressing. Because that machlochet, believe it or not, is over 2,000 years old, and it is in our bones. And if we can start there, then we can go from our tent in confidence and conviction that our tent will still be there waiting for us. Big enough for all kinds of disputes and disagreements, small enough to remind us that we are family. Complex, complicated, sometimes dysfunctional, but always beautiful. That is family. Shabbat shalom.